everyone, welcome to today's community sewing project. Today we're going to be making masks. You can collect the resources to make these masks from any of our branches in our Take and Make kits. So let's put one on and start making. In your kit you'll find your instructions and template if you want to make an extra one. 3 pieces, 1, 2, 3 pieces of fabric, pre-cut out, so you don't even need to cut out your template if you don't want to, and 1 piece of elastic to be cut in half. You'll also need a pair of scissors, some dressmaker's pins or some tailoring pins, and a needle and thread or a sewing machine. So we're going to take our elastic, fold it in half, then take your scissors and cut it in the middle. You can measure it if you want, but these have already been measured out, so folding it in half will get you the exact right amount. Now, taking the front of your mask, the happy pattern, and we're going to tack these into place. So you're going to need your pins for this. Placing them nice and high in the corner. You're going to want to pin it so it can be sewn in place. So now they're pinned in place, you're going to want to tack these in place either using your sewing machine or a needle and thread. They'll just hold it in place while you do the remainder of your sewing. Remember, this is just a tacking stitch, so it just holds it in place while you sew the rest of your piece. So it's a little bit messy, but that will all be covered when you sew and you can tidy it up later. Now repeat on the other 3. As you can see, all held in place. Okay, now we've tacked them in place, it's time to assemble for our next step in sewing. You want to place the front piece touching the back piece. So your main colour face to face, and then the piece that's going to not be seen, it's going to be in between these 2 pieces of fabric at the back. Taking your pins, pin it in place so it doesn't move while you're sewing. Now you have to leave a gap, so it's best to mark it with your pins so you don't accidentally sew it all together. And we're ready for the sewing machine. So remembering to leave a gap, you're going to start about 3/4 down your piece of fabric. Remembering to do a reverse stitch when you first start so that that gap doesn't rip open when you go to turn it inside out. And just a straight stitch all the way around. And that's all the way around. Remembering we've left that gap so we can turn it inside out. Okay, so just trimming off the excess corners, snipping them in the corner. It will give you really sharp corners on your finished product. Now, remembering that the green was on the outside, we're going to turn it inside out from here. A really good tip is as you work your way through, you'll feel the elastic. If you pull out on that, it will help you get your mask inside out really quick. And just pull on those edges on the elastic and those corners should pop out nice and smooth. Look at that. Next step is to iron it. So we're going to close up this gap by sewing all the way around the edge. It will also make the mask really secure. So start in the corner, about 6 mils in. This is just, for the most of it, it's going to be a decorative stitch, but it will also close up that hole. And don't forget to do a reverse stitch to finish off to make it secure. For the most part, it looks like a decorative stitch, but the gap is closed and you've got a really secure mask now. On to the next step. Okay, so now we've got our mask, but it's not kind of going to work the way it is. We're going to need to do our pleats. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. You can take your mask pattern, as you can see mine's a bit well used, and fold along the pleat lines. Now this mask only gives you 2 pleats and I actually prefer 3. So you can just work out a 3rd pleat line by folding along this way and getting your 3rd pleat. So what you're going to want to do to make this system work is place your probably well-worn looking pattern on top of your fabric, and then you're going to want to fold down. So hold and fold, and then hold and fold, and then hold and fold. And you can either pin it as you go, but even if you just remove that, you can see those ridges have already started to come into place. That will give you your pleat lines. So once you have your pleats in place, you're going to need to pin them. Double check and make sure your pleats are nice and even. So do them one at a time. This isn't a step you're going to want to rush. So don't just pin them near where you're going to sew. Pin them towards the middle. That way you can see if it's sitting straight. Now we're ready to sew. When you're sewing this, you're going to want to sew going with the pleats, not against. 2 reasons. Your machine's going to drag it and separate your pleats, and you're going to wonder, if you're sewing it the other way, why all of a sudden your pleats are all spread out and awkward. So by doing this, it's just going to be forcing those to stay nice and tight together. The other thing you're going to want to do is make sure your elastic stays off to the side. Nothing worse than making the perfect mask only to discover that your elastic is sewn to the back and you can't use it. So just remembering, elastic off to the side and pleats facing away from your presser foot. You're going to sew in as close to that line that you've already sewn around. That's so that you don't end up with an awkward line sewn onto it. Remembering to do a reverse stitch to make sure it stays nice and secure. Just like last time, you just want it to be facing away from the presser foot and the elastic off to the side. If you're like me and you're right-handed, this might be a little bit awkward, but it's much better than the alternative. All that's left to do now is trim off these extra threads and give it a good press. And that's how you make your mask. All that's left to do now is put it on.